Hello and welcome to the Serpent Temple podcast. I'm here with Caroline from Dystopian Future Movies and Church of the Cosmic Skull. Hello, Caroline.
Hello, Nina.
How are you doing today?
I'm grand.
Great. We're going to do an interview with the Psycards, which are based on the Jungian archetypes. And there's a little bit of crossover with tarot. So we're going to do a little diamond star reading style thing. Give those a shuffle. Okay. And then tell me more about what you do.
In the bands.
In the bands, in life, in everything.
So I am a primary school teacher. I've been teaching for almost 20 years. I taught in Dublin for a long time, and then I moved to the UK. I recently retrained as a music specialist. I'm still kind of in training, so I now just teach music in primary school. And then the bands, obviously, which we will get to, I'm sure.
Amazing. Well, we'll get to them through the medium of the Psycard. So I'm going to place them out for you. So this is going to be your present. This is going to be your past. This is the future. This is your driving force. And this is your goal in life. Or it might not be.
Okay,
we'll
cool.
find out.
We'll see, yeah.
So I have a little book as well of descriptions. So whenever you turn a card over, I'll read it to you. And you can tell me what comes to mind when you see what you see. So do you want to start with the present?
Okay, cool.
Fortune. Well, hey, that's a good one.
Okay.
I'll read that to you and we'll see what it says. So, Fortune. A seeker, lantern in hand, is shown ascending a winding staircase leading up to a garret where a treasure chest is waiting. The card signifies the quest ending in fulfillment. It stands for success achieved by a good luck, persistence, and an increase in wealth. Well, you literally just released The War of the Ether, a new album by Dystopian Future Movies.
Indeed, yes. So, we spent most of... actually, it was kind of like just as the pandemic started in the March of 2020, we were finishing up a tour with Gravelines, and we had to cancel some of the dates because the whole world was, collapsing. Yeah. So it was just as our last album, our second album, In Violet, was just out. So it was out just a few weeks, and so we had to basically just shelve the entire thing, as a lot of bands did at the time. So we kind of were at home, and I was like, well, might as well just start writing album number 3. And so, I'm obviously very aware of the story of the mother and baby homes in Ireland, the Tuam Mother and Baby Home, particularly in Galway. So kind of went down a massive rabbit hole with that, reading the report, 3,000-page report that actually only came out about a year ago, so kind of got through all of that, went on YouTube, digs and loads of interviews with different with survivors and news reports. So, and the album just started to percolate. So I just wrote most of it in a few months in 2020, and then as the lockdowns eased and our studio was we could go back to the studio, I started kind of gradually, very tentatively playing these kind of really upsetting songs to Bill and Rafe from the band, and so it kind of went from there. So that's they began to, that's kind of how DFM works, I guess, is the I bring the bones and they flesh it out with their instruments. Oisin was involved still, our old bassist, and then he was really busy with work and lives in Sheffield, so it all became so we did the album together, just the three of us, and Bill ended up recording the bass, did the whole rhythm section himself, and so that's kind of how it came about, but it was kind of a labour of huge intensity, I suppose, because of the subject matter and the closeness that you get so involved in the songs. You live within them, especially when they have such intense content and they mean so much, so it was it's definitely the most, I don't know, intense, visceral, I don't know, like kind of the album that we've done so far.
I feel like it deals with like intense misfortune, with the subject matter of of abandonment and loss and restriction. Like you can feel all of that there.
Like some of those interviews that you read, like Catherine Corliss, if anyone was at any of we did a few gigs to kind of celebrate the release of the album, and we played the entire album through. Rafe, he's a kind of a projector. He does live projections for church as well. So him and Bill work really well on all of that. So he did kind of like an arty projection of Catherine Corliss, who's the lady who did all the work around the discovering of the 796 babies. And she was kind of on the wall the whole way through the gig every time. So it was almost like she was part of the performance. And that was something that came quite late to the idea of what we were going to do with the performance, but it was brought huge amounts of, I don't know, it was almost like she was there with us, and the babies were there with us, and all of the survivors, and those, adopted who never knew they were even from the mother and baby homes, because all it was all covered up. It was all, names were changed, whole histories were erased to cover up the shame. So that was misfortune, I guess, is it's one way of
And yet, as well, though, the album's been received so well as well. There has, I hope, been fulfillment and joy in that respect. But it is so much. It must be a very powerful feeling, and a big feeling to be doing something that's bigger than yourself, and feeling that when you're on stage.
Oh, massively! I think that's a huge part of every time on a Saturday we'd spend 12 hours in the studio usually. Like sandwiches, like Sainsbury's sandwiches, water, more sandwiches, and that kind of like 12-hour, it became, it was just, especially initially, I think it was just so intense. And then sometimes, I think like any art project or any kind of something you get really involved in, sometimes it loses its meaning almost in the practice of it, and in the creation, the honing of the thing. And then, you take a few weeks off, you can't come in, and then you come back to it and you're like, oh my God, this is what this is. And it's just so intense again. So I can't remember what your question was. I'm not sure if I answered it.
Me too. It's not important though, because what you said was amazing. So it's all good. Yeah, that's really interesting. Have you? I don't know how long ago it was, because they found the bodies recently, and it was it was during. So there may be listeners who don't have an understanding of it, and my understanding isn't great too. So was it a lot of American women whose babies were taken away from them, and women who were single who became pregnant outside of marriage, and the church would take away their children?
Yeah, so in Ireland there was from so it would have been like the late 1800s, early 1900s, more around the beginning of the Irish state. These mother and baby homes and the Magdalen laundries that other people might be more familiar with. This was where women who became pregnant outside of marriage were sent. Now, sometimes they went willingly. Sometimes they were sent by their families or disowned or kind of sent there. Sometimes, the priest was called. That's kind of one of the lines from the first track on the album. But the priest was called, and they were removed from the family home and taken to the mother and baby home as a complete cover-up, as a just like, we need to remove this stain from the village, from the town, from the family, so that we can, and the woman then arrived there, and her name was changed because such small knit, close-knit communities, that if you call someone by their real name, the people would, other women there would know who they were, so it was a real, kind of covert operation. The baby, or the woman, would have the baby then often in a very not medically safe way. And the baby was there for 1 year. The baby was taken away and put into, the baby area where all the babies were in, hundreds in a room. And the women would go and look after the babies, not necessarily their own, for 1 year, and then the mother was kicked out of the home. Now, they weren't allowed to take their baby with them. So often they couldn't really return to the family home. Often they were disowned. So in a lot of cases, they would emigrate to England or America or wherever you can go, or another town. And in rare cases, the baby would be allowed to leave with the mother, but that was incredibly rare, almost non-existent. And then the remaining babies that survived were often exported to America for money.
Oh, okay.
And the money was then given to the Catholic Church in Ireland. And that was all, again, done under the table, not legit. No formal documentation, names changed. These people would, grow up in America, they wouldn't realise where they were from. They might know it was Ireland, but they wouldn't know where anything about their mothers. But then the reason, in this particular home, the Tuam Mother and Baby Home in Galway, 796 were found in what was a septic tank used previously in the workhouse, which would have been in the mid 1800s. So it was a decommissioned septic tank, but they were just wrapped simply in a blanket and effectively stacked, against walls. And they were. It was written on maps at the time that this was a children's graveyard. It was known, and in the 1970s, 2 boys were playing in that area. A new housing estate was built when the Mother and Baby was knocked in the 1960s. A housing estate was built in the 1970s, and the children's graveyard, which was written on the map, was covered over, and a playground was built, tarmac and on top of it. But there was some kind of area that was obviously unfinished, and these children playing fell in on top of, and one of them produced bones, a skull, and ran home and thought it was a toy. And the people it was, anyway, a priest was called once again, and the area was blessed, and it was a famine grave, was the party line from the Irish family in the mid 1800s, and book closed, that's that. And so people knew, and Catherine Corliss she spent a long time just as an amateur local historian doing a little the Mother and Baby Home. I remember children from that home when I was in school. So she did some research into it just out of fascination, of interest. And the deeper she got, she began to realise that there was so many names. I can't even remember what it was now. She went to the local council and she got all of the names of all the children that were ever there. And deceased, where are they buried? It's incredibly unlikely that they were accepted by the family who turfed out the mother. So it's not like they went to the family grave. Where are they? And it was then that she just dug, and there was a lot of closed doors and a lot of we're not getting into this, and let's just leave this be. But she kept at it and did so for nearly 10 years, until just this year has had the government has finally got on board, and there's remuneration talks. There's talks now about the babies being exhumed, DNA tested, properly reburied. But that took 10 years of pushing and a lot of pushback for her, and she just did it because the babies. I've read her autobiography, and she just couldn't stop thinking about these babies, and she had to, it was, do it for them, and yeah.
You're bringing tears to my eyes.
Yeah, it's
so
pretty
heavy.
intense, isn't it?
It's beautiful isn't the right word, but it's powerful subject matter,
Yeah.
and I can totally see why you've gone for that. And I'm assuming that you chose War of the Ether as a title because it was like a wartime term for propaganda. Is that right?
Yeah, well, funnily enough, the phrase came to when I wrote the song "War of the Ether." That it just came, and I don't know really where it came from. To be honest with you, it just came, and then I googled it and was like, "Is this something else?" And then I saw that it was from the wartime propaganda, and I was, "Oh, that's interesting." And then it was only after as well that some other people, since the album's come out, and said, "Oh, ether, as in."
Chemical.
Yeah, and I didn't even think of that. That wasn't. I suppose what I was thinking was that it's the war of this ethereal. Like, what does it even mean?
Like matter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's I get so into it now. But in Ireland, there's been such, church and state. There's still huge amounts of, like even when I taught in Ireland, like the board of management. The people who ran the school, all tied into the church. The head of the board of management, the local priest. So the education system, like so much more. It's only that's beginning to loosen ties now, only now. So Ireland, I think, has been in the grips of a religious dominance and authoritative for a long, long time. It's kind of like after the British left, there was a void, and it had to be filled by something. And religion was right. The Catholic Church were perfectly poised to come in and go, right, we'll tell you how to sort yourselves out. We'll prove to Europe, to the rest of the world, that we are a legitimate, nation of our own, separate from Britain, and we'll show them how. Clean, I guess, is the word, isn't it? That's the word that keeps coming to mind. It's like, pure, unsullied, look how
virginal, legitimate.
Perfect, exactly.
Yeah.
And, I'm reading a book at the moment. I'm still, getting through it. Fintan O'Toole, great journalist, Irish journalist, and he's written about Ireland from 1957 up to the present day through his own eyes. That's his lifetime. So he just kind of talks about political, personal, everything that's kind of through his, that whole bit in the 1980s. Like, well, I mean, he talks about a number of the things that are dealt with in War of the Ether, and how the church really was the boss. You couldn't look sideways, and the church would, in many, many different respects, and huge misogyny, obviously, because women bore the brunt of the righteous. Yeah. Can't even finish that sentence. You know what I mean?
People definitely know.
Yeah.
If they don't, then they're probably too far gone. But yeah, I mean, I was reminded. It's been many years since I read his work, but I was reminded somewhat of James Joyce.
Yeah.
So you're talking of the literary approach. When I read your lyrics, definitely the stream of consciousness, kind of almost Talking Heads approach of like different points of view pointing to the same bigger picture, definitely revealed itself. Because I know I read bits of Ulysses, and there's Dubliners, of course, as well. So I'm glad that I wasn't completely off on that connection that I made there too.
Yeah. And he did talk in Ulysses about the industrial schools. That was a big there's mention of part of that, and the industrial schools, the Magdalen laundries, the mother and baby homes. That was all part of this. The complex of secreting away of, the impurities, I guess, of the society. And the industrial schools for girls and boys, often that would be if a family lost the father or mother, were lost in some way through death or whatever, doesn't really matter, or if the children were not being cared for properly or whatever, they would be sent to these industrial schools just as it's almost like social worker coming and, but I mean, the industrial school is a much, much worse place to be than the family home in a lot of cases. And Fintan O'Toole talks about that quite a lot in his book. But that it's all part of the same, world there.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Speaking of the past, shall we go to the past, which I believe is this card?
Okay.
Prison.
Right, now.
Well, that's definitely apt.
Yeah.
I'll read that for you. So it's number 37 for people who are into the whole numbers thing. And I'm just going to turn to that in the book. I feel like I'm telling a story.
Please do.
The prison. A manacled prisoner languishes behind bars, but the sunlight floods into the cell. This card stands for those situations where we are seemingly trapped, where the key is turned on us and we have no freedom of action.
Well, it kind of fits quite well with what I've just been saying, I suppose, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what else to say about all of that. I mean, it's like so kind of, yeah.
Are there people today who are aware that they come from that situation? Do people know that they're from those houses where, like, they were abandoned or?
Well, in the industrial schools, they would have known for sure. But in the mother and baby homes, like I say, a lot of those children were sent to America or England, and or they were also fostered out to families in Ireland. Now, in some cases, that didn't go very well because they were, abused in the houses. Sometimes just like overworked. It was just like having another farmhand or someone to help out. So the child was almost. Right, great, we'll have another worker, and they weren't treated like the other children in the family. It's really kind of, you can imagine how that went. There was money sent, you see, to these foster homes to look after the children, and the money wasn't spent on the children at all, of course, and they might have had shoes that had holes in them, and sure they were, not treated very well at all. And then also the children that remained in the home, they were sent to local schools. And Caroline Cawley is the woman who kind of discovered all of this and researched it, was in a school in Tuam, close to Tuam. And she was in school with some of the children from the home. And she talks so kind of, heartbreakingly about these children who would arrive with the hobnail boots, and they were set apart. They would arrive into the class later than everyone else. They would sit at a different table. They were treated entirely differently by the teacher. They would leave earlier, they'd be taken out of the class and marched back to the home. And no one wanted to be their friend. It was almost like a threat. Well, if you don't sort yourself out there, John, you'll be sitting beside, who over here, So, can you imagine what that would do,
Yeah.
So Catherine speaks, so like I say, when she was a child herself. And of course you get taken in by all of this. She tells a heartbreaking story about, taunting one of them herself, and I think this is one of the things that remained in her mind was, she took a sweet wrapper with no sweet in it. I think that's how the story goes. And she kind of says, oh, do you want this, to one of the home children. And of course, they'd never seen a sweet in their lives,
Oh my God.
And... oh, not really, well, this kind of... So, yeah. And she said that the fact that she did that remained with her, because, children, that they watch what's going on, what their peers are doing, and they emulate it, and then it's only after your conscience kind of begins to, you wonder about what you've just done. And so I think all of these things made her into the woman who ended up making such changes in the country. So... sometimes making those mistakes and it's really quite valuable, because then it begins to help you unravel your own prejudices or your own ideas of what's right and wrong. And, we all need to examine our conscience and our own kind of inbuilt prejudices from wherever they might come, because we all have them, don't we?
Yeah.
No matter where we're from. And yeah, kind of picking those apart and beginning to kind of, do what's right. Anyway, yeah, so I can't remember again. Can't remember the question.
Me neither. It's all good. We're on the same page. That is really interesting. Usually with prison cards as well, it's usually to do with like self-imprisonment too. Okay. So it sounds like, Corliss is on this journey of freeing herself from stuff that she's done in the past as well. And what you describe, it sounds like a caste system too, which is, I had no idea this was a thing. And as you say, it was
and a lot of people don't.
And,
I think that's when all of this came out. And again, Fintan O'Toole says this so well, the known unknown. Yeah, or is it the unknown known? I can't remember which one it is. But you get what I mean. Yeah. It's like, and it's funny growing up in Ireland as well, in the, like, in the 80s and 90s. There was so much of that. You knew that these homes existed. The last home, mother and baby home in Ireland, closed in 1996.
My goodness.
1996. So it is we all kind of know. I even spoke to my parents, and you knew these things existed. Sometimes you would have direct contact, sometimes you wouldn't. Sometimes you just knew of a friend of a cousin of someone. But it's the known unknown, the unknown known. Can't remember. You get the idea. So yeah.
Fascinating. Shall we go to the future?
Shall we?
The Tower. Okay, number 25. This is an interesting card. This one usually stumps people. It's quite a mysterious one.
Okay.
A castle stands on a hillside without a moat or a visible door. Proud, stern, and unyielding, the symbol represents achievement gained in the face of adversity and reflects sometimes the arrogant conscious mind repressing the unconscious mind beneath it. The known unknown. It can often presage the pride that goes before a fall. It can also stand for male sexuality.
I didn't expect that. I was like shoehorned in there.
This was written in the 80s. There's some like really misogynistic stuff in there. Like, hopefully we won't get to any more of that.
Whoa, okay. I only caught like half of that. I was like, desperately trying to kind of like.
There's so much going on.
There's a lot going on there.
Do you want me to go over it again?
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, the way I view this card anyway is it's about the unconscious and the conscious. So like the tower is often our own minds. Okay. There's no door, there's no moat. It's about how the walls you put up, the boundaries you put up between you and the world. It can also be about for example, the pride that comes before a fall. Oftentimes if you isolate yourself too much, you can fall prey to the sort of horrors of your own mind, the prejudices that you have if you don't examine your conscious enough. And it can also be about, do you let people in easily? Do you keep people away? In terms of art, it can also be about the creative process. Sometimes we're trapped in our towers. Sometimes we're looking from above but it sounds like with you, the tower could be the mother and baby homes. It could be performance stuff as well, like how close you view yourselves to the audience and how close you view yourselves to the art and to the others in the band as well, because this is like, do you view yourself as a conduit or are you the thing itself? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. The like I say, on the creation of this album, so I bring the ideas to the lads and kind of just really nervously kind of like as if I'm a just like acoustic guitar, but it's an S tube semi plugged in, kind of singing quietly, I think this melody is okay, so that's kind of the idea, and then we begin to tease it all out. But one of the interesting things with this album was the first track. So just as we were, which is the spoken word track, just as we were finishing up the tour pre-pandemic with Gravelines, every time we were doing sound check, Rafe was doing this kind of chord progression, and it was kind of like our little sound checky type scenario, and it just kind of really kind of stuck. And then as things were, so usually he, I bring the ideas, so it was unusual for someone else to do that. But so we kind of started jamming this out, and I was like, oh, it's great. Like, but I guess I'm not really used to singing on someone else's how I write things is kind of like, that's a nice chord, and this singy thing over it is pretty okay. Yeah, that'll do. Sweet, nice. Whereas, you know, Rafe playing his chord progression, I was like, I don't really know how to sing over someone else's thing. So we were one night late in the studio. He was like, do you usually have some kind of a short story or poem on the go? Do you have any, speaky thing? And I was like, yeah, I've got this story that I was, just kind of, it was like a stream of conscious. Funny you should say that earlier. It's very much a stream of conscious, just within that mother and baby home idea of this girl who doesn't really know she's pregnant. See, a lot of that back to that story, the lack of education, because, education is power, and as we know, but the Catholic Church's idea was, and even when I was in school, that if you tell the women and the lads about sex, then they'll be doing it. They'll be all at it then. So, so it's kind of keep that information away, which actually is just so dangerous, So a lot of these girls didn't really understand, what sex was or what was happening, and then they were pregnant. They didn't even know how they got pregnant, and they didn't know if they were pregnant. They didn't really, I suppose they knew maybe when their mum was pregnant or a lady up the road, they began to see the similarities and, oh my God, I'm pregnant, how did I get pregnant? They didn't, so that's kind of how that short story is, that story of that kind of like, and also the family life in a rural place where they don't really speak to each other. The relationship is very fraught. Anyway, but yeah, so I just started kind of speaking over this jam that Rafe and Bill had kind of just done, the chord progression and whatever. And we have this vocal booth where there's a window and there's a wee door and the window's there, and then you can see Bill kind of sat at his and Rafe's on the other couch, and the two of them just stood off at the window. We're like,
that's amazing.
And I was like trying to reading this. So on the first take, the first demo of it, you can just hear me kind of just like laughing and call it the subject matter. It's just because the two of them were like, it's one of the best memories of the whole thing. But yeah, so sometimes these ideas come like at 11 p.m. After a few whiskeys, and I'm off chatting about then the priest was called, etc. So it was just, it kind of came from that. We got so immersed in the story, and those kind of ideas just come, and then I was just like, I'm not going to do spoken word. I mean, I don't know if I can do that, and like, it's, and so I'm really glad we stuck with it, and it's probably maybe one of the proudest moments of the album, and to play it live is just, so I think what you were saying about the live playing these songs live is just like nothing else. Like obviously Church of the Cosmic Skull is just a whole other kind of sermon, a sermon of a different kind, with and a lot, because church has a lot of it, we feel really close to the audience. It's very much that sense of community, and the church is in session, and the crowd is just such a massive part of what that band does live, and I think on this DFM album it's just become exactly like the same but complete in a very different way, where we did 4 shows, but there was such a sense of like, it was almost like such a weighty, heavy silence. So in between words, I'll never forget the first time we did that first song in Leeds, and it was the first gig we'd done in like 2 years, over 2.5 years, and it was just like, it's like all the air went out of the room, and it was all I could do to not. I didn't know if I wanted to just, when your breath is up here.
Yeah, you're like, it's all in your chest.
Exactly. So I was like, reading it like this, I was like, there's no, I can't. And it was just, became, almost, so I had to just have a word with myself and just like, without, taking too much for breath, and then the song's out of, whack, and then the lads are like, you're talking too slow. But it was just, and I think every show after that as well, the crowd, it just became, people were just so, it was almost like we were all holding hands. Oh, that sounds so... But do you know what I mean? It was like they were on the stage, or it was all just one big stage, and we were all there. Just really, it was more intimate than intimate can be, or something. It's really, really hard to put words on. But so yeah, I think the people, it's just all one big performance with everybody involved, and a lot of people, crying, and it's a very I'm getting emotional now. Yeah, it's just really intense. It's beyond intense, if that's possible. So yeah, it's a privilege to be able to speak about these things and have people hear about it for the first time in some cases, because unless you're Irish, I think this story did make international news, but obviously faded very quickly from that. There's a lot going on in the world. So I think for a lot of people, it was the first time they'd heard about it. Then a similar situation in Canada was uncovered. I don't know if you know
Is it with native children?
That's right.
Yeah.
In a very similar situation.
There was a full-on genocide in the Americas.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's terrible what people do when they find differences in others. Yeah.
There you go. Exactly. And the differences can be it's not even
minimal.
difference, just minimal. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like a child born out of wedlock. I mean, that's, so yeah, privilege to be able to speak about it, and to have to have people affected by it as much as we have, I suppose. And then what's the whole idea, as a primary school teacher, is to knowledge is power. If the children don't cover up World War II, and do you know what I mean? Make sure they know all of these things that have happened, so that we don't let them happen again.
Exactly.
That's it, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I find it really interesting as well that something I've certainly found is it's a lot more vulnerable to speak on stage than to sing on stage.
Yes. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? It feels like it's so much more you.
Yeah.
There's no performance there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a lot more scary, and
Yeah,
I find it interesting, and the atmosphere you describe. I don't know if you've seen her live, but Lingua Ignota shows are really similar.
Yes.
It's horrific in the most beautiful and communal way. Yeah, it's like a pain that everyone can understand.
Absolutely. I saw her at Roadburn.
Oh my god.
That was one of the and her just an incredible projection. I think it was kind of like a cult. I don't know if you were there.
I wasn't at Roadburn. I saw her in London though.
Yeah. I don't know if she had the same kind of live show, but she had a projection story, I think, but it looked like it was a kind of a cult story, something. I'm not sure where it was from, but that was one of the, me and Bill stood there and went, and Rafe, our projection guy. So we've been putting together ideas for whenever we get to do more shows. But Lingua Ignota's performance, just a huge inspiration. She's just it's visceral, isn't it?
It's terrifying. Yeah. I don't know if she's going to hurt herself or hurt one of the audience members, or but and the I love her so much, and the subject matter as well. It's definitely it's so personal, and yet it's very universal at the same time.
Absolutely, exactly, and that's why all of these stories, writing this album about a story, or being inspired by these stories, because they're all just human stories, and we can learn from things. And perhaps the other thing is that perhaps, in Lingua Ignota's case, perhaps some of the people listening to her stories, that was them.
Exactly.
They can identify with that and maybe get some strength from that, or begin to deal with something that perhaps they had closed off, or so it's all a big potential healing scenario.
Definitely. I love that.
Healing scenario.
Beautiful. Shall we go with, this is your driving force. Can
Go
you
for
read?
it.
Do you want me to?
No, kind of.
It's not. I should probably do the cards closer in future. Birth. Well, that's the perfect driving force. You were born. So number 15. I'll read that to you. New life is seen springing forth from the womb, the plant making a new green shoot with droplets of fresh dew under a morning sky. The card stands for the natural coming to birth of new ideas, a new hope, a new person entering the closed world of your life. It is a card of spring and psychological growth with the promise of new beginnings.
Oh,
That's good.
that is a good one, yeah. Yeah, that's kind of made me think of, my kids at school. So I'm a primary school teacher, but... because, like I say, I retrained as a music specialist. I'm not special, and my knowledge isn't special yet either, so I don't know if that word is correct. But, person who just teaches music. So that's it really kind of reminded me of, it's like a whole new way of seeing music. And having come to performance and writing songs late-ish, like I was like 31, that was kind of, it's very relatively new, and also bringing music to the children, because I think off camera we were saying that in a lot of schools, there's music isn't really taught as a curriculum subject at all or very well. Often because the staff members don't feel confident as other subjects, and if some schools are looking, they have an actual employed specialist who comes in and delivers that curriculum, and that's it. But in some cases, it's ignored entirely because of the SATs exam, testing process, and the emphasis is on scoring highly in maths and English. So the emphasis is on music, and I think in career-wise that was a real rebirth in kind of having to retrain. I know how to teach maths, etc., but how to kind of introduce music theory, in a way that very small children can understand and get it, like really truly embed rhythmic and pitch skills, and build the hearing, your kind of inner hearing is what they kind of call it in this training I did. So that inbuilt knowledge, and it's a lot less mathsy than from a lot less technical, a lot more accessible. So that's been just a really kind of revelation in because it's made me understand music writing in a different way, and then there's a lot of crossover. It's really interesting, the creative world, and then breaking it right down, musical concepts for the children to help a 5-year-old understand music theory is. So that's been a kind of a teaching rebirth, I think.
And it sounds immensely challenging, but also really rewarding. I'm so curious as well, do you find that children are more open to music than they are for example, for like a science or English? Do you find that it's more children are suited to receiving that knowledge?
Yeah, well, there's loads. Yeah, that's been a real interesting revelation, actually, because in my school we've a lot of kids who come from Syria. There's a lot of kids who've come as refugees, kids who come from other countries. A lot of children who don't speak any English initially when they come to us. Obviously learn English very quickly. Kids are like sponges. But one of the things that can really bring them out of themselves is music, because they don't really know what the words of what we're singing, but the melody is a universal thing, isn't it? And beat and rhythm, and just like tapping their drum. We've got their little claves out, and tune percussion and things like that, and they suddenly feel like, I know what this is, or at least I can mess about with it in a musical way, and I'm like, wow, well done, give a lot of encouragement, and so that gives them confidence then that they can bring to other subjects and bring to their education across curricular, and then we have a lot of special needs kids and all sorts of from vulnerable backgrounds, and that's been a revelation as well. These kids who've really struggled, they're in foster care. We have a lot of homeless kids, be it, you know, living in a hotel or couch surfing with their families. And so a lot of psychological, there's a lot going on in the world at the moment. So sometimes music can be just, they come in and they're like, yay, because it's just joy time, you know. And for the little ones, it's very, you know, happy clappy and, you know, kind of like, well done, let's do, you know. And for the older ones then, you know, as well, it has to be all based around joy and fun. And it's not kind of, right, get your exercise books out now. We're going to write down, what is it? You know, this is a treble clef. You know what I mean? It's a lot more building the inner hearing, the inner knowledge, and the, you know, kinesthetic approach to learning, rather than just like look at it, learn it by heart, learn it by rote. And I find then that I think your original question, like, some of the kids have an innate, not, you know, kind of understanding or enjoyment, and they do. It's really, and sometimes it's the kids that you don't expect. I go and tell the teacher afterwards, oh, Johnny's having a great time. He's really, and she's like, wow, because he really struggles with maths or English, or, you know, but he's excelling, or kind of really, music has, you know, brought something out in him. So it's incredibly rewarding, challenging, like you say, as well, for lots of obvious reasons. But, you know, yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. And do you teach scales as well with what you're doing? How do you do that? I'm really curious, because that was the thing that really screwed me up when I hated memorizing scales so much.
Well, we have glockenspiels.
You have glockenspiels.
Got some glockenspiels, yeah. So cute. So our year fours have the Nottingham Music Service come in and do whole school you know, lessons, stringed instruments. So I mean, that's an incredible, in a school like mine, that's an incredible gift for free. Well, school pays, but it's all, you know, the children access it for free. And so they get to learn viola, violin, cello.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and they can continue that after school.
Fantastic.
In area band. It's great. Like, I mean, the music hubs around the country, I feel like I'm doing an education podcast now, but you know, they're incredible partners. So that's what they do in year four, and they can continue that. And then for the rest of the kids, I write glockenspiel time. So I mean, it's quite like a piano, and I mean the music notes are written on the actual keys, so it's, you know, it's kind of easier for them to. But they, weirdly, because of all the embedded knowledge and that they have from before, they're ready. They're ready.
That's amazing.
And they're kind of like, ooh, a more kind of technical, they think it's quite technical, like, this is the scale of C major. Like, ooh, what's the relative minor? You know, and they're, you know.
Circle of fifth sing in year four.
I know, it's so cute. So they actually think like, oh, we're getting all technical now. This is hard. They love a challenge, you know. It's like, so all I have to say is like, anyone ready for a challenge? And they're kind of like, you know.
That is so
yeah,
cute.
It's very cute. Couch everything as a challenge. Like, who wants a challenge? Oh, you don't want a challenge? Oh, you do want a challenge. Anyway,
at this age, though, if you say ready for a challenge, I'm like, no, I'm
I know, I think that's exactly.
Yeah.
So it took me a long time to realise challenge is a good thing. Like, okay, they love a challenge. So yeah, so scales, yeah, they eat that up. It's amazing.
Amazing.
Like, yeah.
Gosh.
So I'm really lucky. I have a great bunch. I have a great school and a really supportive.
That is
staff.
amazing. Oh, I kind of want to travel back in time and become like a year four kid and just like go to one of your classes and just be like,
come watch the craziness.
Oh, please, yeah. I mean, you know, maybe release those videos like publicly for adults too, because I will happily start relearning theory for you. That would be great.
Dude, yeah, it was when I started that training, you know, even the person who was given the training, it's the Kadai methodology is the British Kadai Academy, and so it's just it's a much more kind of embedded version of just, you know, music theory. And they were even saying it was a revelation for them when they began to look at this way of seeing music, and I was there going, oh my god, it was just such a kind of like, now I get it, you know. So I'd say for a lot of adults, and a few people I've described it to, they've been like, oh, you know. So I think the whole world could do.
That's amazing. Yeah. I just remember the ABRSM books and the miles of paragraphs on triple duple time, and like the CD, and it's just like a guy with a metronome, and you just zone out immediately when he starts speaking. Yeah.
And we do all of that in basic songs. So we, you know, introduce like duple time at really quite a young age, but it's through a simple little song, and they feel like they really have ownership of all the knowledge.
Amazing.
You know, because all the aspects, the rhythmic aspects, the pitch aspects, the fact that there's two beats in a bar, you know, all of that. They feel like empowered by, they're like, oh, I know that, you know. And like I say, if it's through song, your first instrument, vocal, that's, you've already got that internally, do you get me? And then you can, any instrument then is a bonus.
Do you think that people sang first or spoke first?
Oh, sang.
Yeah.
I think.
I agree.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, because like the spoken word is really sing-song. Like this is something I've realised in
It's very melodic,
It's very
language.
melodic,
And like
for
tone
sure.
is a kind of melody, right?
Yeah.
Like like the melody of anger, the melody of
Exactly.
everything else, yeah.
For sure. Like even I even say to my staff at school, because they were like, oh, singing, you know, and I kind of say, well, I mean, just listen to your tone of voice rising and falling.
Yeah.
You are, that is a form of, you know, and I love when the kids are, you know, a little bit leery and I'm trying to get them to just, you know, I'm like, really drop my pitch. Like,
Kids hate it when you don't shout.
exactly.
It's much worse if you don't shout. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I never shout. It's
Yeah.
all just, you know, varying pitches of voice. I'm like, and then they're like, oh my God. You know.
No, miss, please.
Yeah, it's like what's that thing when people do sounds?
Oh, ASMR.
Yeah.
I love ASMR.
Yeah. Like that's
Yeah.
what they say. Like, oh, miss, you're like the ASMR, you know.
That's so funny. I love that. Should we see what the future holds? The scales. Oh my God.
How weird.
The scales. Holy crap. Okay.
Which one? What's the relative minor?
The Apple scale. I don't know. This is number 24. Well, hopefully this means you're going to be rolling it out. And it's going to be really big because that's the future. So, a pair of scales with fruit hanging from an ancient twisted fruit tree. The symbol stands for justice, moderation, prudence, and a sense of balance in our affairs. It represents common sense and a harmony with the world of nature.
Yeah, balance. I mean, you know, I spoke earlier about
The work-life.
the work-life balance, which is always a struggle. But yes, I part-time teach, part-time do bands stuff, and you know that because you could be working all the time, isn't that it? You know, in this modern world, so me and Bill are always trying to get that balance of let's turn the computers off today, let us, you know, leave the house. Like shock, you know, yeah. So I think, you know, see, as a teacher, I mean, every person who works in a school will say that you never switch off from that. 'Cause you're always trying to find better ways of doing things. Also, like thinking about those kids who need you, and some disclosure. You know, that you safeguarding. It's a whole minefield of care in a school, and you never switch off from that. So doing another number of jobs on top of that, like I think, as you probably know, me and Bill, you know, do both of the bands like entirely self-sufficiently, and so self-managed, self-financed, you know, booking, the production, video production, audio production, you know, literally every aspect, with some amount of collaboration with artists and different people. You know, we're surrounded in Nottingham by an incredible amount of amazing people, including people within the band as well. So it's bands, but but that's an unending amount of work. Yeah. Needless to say, so it's difficult to get that balance. But I think because me and Bill are, you know, live together, we pretty much do everything together, you know, that wouldn't work if you know, if my partner and he wasn't involved in any of this. It'd just be a constant battle of like, can we hang out ever?
Yeah.
Like, sorry, I'm off to the studio again. So, you know, we're really lucky. I don't know, it's we've created this, haven't we? So I suppose it's not luck, it's just we've created this because this is what we want.
Yeah, it's the tree that you grew and planted.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so it's we're, you know, I think maybe that's one of the problems, where we're both always kind of working, and it's okayed by the fact we're both always working. Do you know, if there was one party that was like, we need to not do this today, it would be, you know, but we love it, and it's a privilege to be able to make music and have the you know, the skills to do all of that, whatever, and the studio to do it in, and surrounded by an incredible amount of people, all the people in both bands, just absolute legends. And, you know, so that's very lucky.
I love hearing that. As someone who is also in literally the same, you know, in a band with my partner, we do everything ourselves, finance everything ourselves. And we love doing that, but I'd be really curious to hear, because we get asked this all the time, so I'm going to ask you now. Like, why don't you outsource that stuff? Why don't you go to a label? What's made you decide to do it this way?
I suppose there's loads of different reasons. We just got stuck in doing it this way, and built up the skills to be able to do it this way. I mean, you know, Bill is a huge part of that, and it's the ownership of it. You know, label wise, I guess some of the decision making about how you want to present something is taken away, obviously, and in the way things run now, you can kind of self-fund things often in a, you know, pre-sale. We do, you know, put the albums on pre-sale so that the funding is there to complete the, you know, purchase of all of the manufacturing, etc., and then so we can afford to do it that way. So I suppose it's not as necessary to have a label perhaps as it would have been in the past. And then the internet, obviously, we can completely self-promote or put everything, all of our work out into the world that way without, it's you know, 20, 30 years ago you couldn't have done that. So there's that. We do work with bookers now, and, you know, DFM, we're going to be, we're looking to work with some bookers now to move on with that. And we have, both bands have a booker in America, so I'm hoping that DFM will also make it out there soon enough. It's, again, funding.
Exciting.
Very exciting. So Jake from Heavy Talent has really looked after Church last summer. We're going to go back again soon. So we're really lucky to have that for both bands as well on the horizon. But so it's kind of like, it's easier, to answer your question, I guess. It's possible to do a lot of this stuff yourself now. Is one of the reasons. But I think as projects grow, you begin to work with more and more people in different ways. And, you know, so we are kind of doing that in little ways. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you for entertaining that question. I personally hate being asked that, but at the same time, I think it is good to hear what people have to say at the same time, because I think some people don't realise how much potential there is to do stuff on your own. Yeah.
But it's a skill set thing as well. I mean, Bill is, he'll hate me going on about this, but, you know, he's the, you know, the graphic designer, the artistic vision, obviously, behind Church, and, you know, production, you know, all of that stuff. So, like, that's his skill set that we utilise for all the projects, you know, so mostly his skill set. But yeah, so to have a Bill on board is, I mean...
To have a Bill on board, I love that.
Yeah, get everyone to have a Bill on board. He's going to hate this.
It could be like a church song.
Yeah, exactly.
Like well, thank you so much. I mean, to look at this is a beautiful story. You go from birth with like the shoot coming out of the ground. You go to this ancient tree of knowledge with like scales hanging off it. You know, you've escaped from prison. You've climbed up the stairs to fortune, your big tower of success and fulfillment. And now you're reaping the fruit of your labours. So that was a wonderful story that we just experienced, and thank you for exploring it with me and for coming all the way from Nottingham, clearly just for this podcast. But thank you. Is there anything else you want to say?
I don't think so, really. Thank you so much to everyone who's listened to Word Ether, and thank you for supporting it and getting involved and being emotional with us around it. And so That's about it. And thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much for coming. It was a pleasure. And go check out Worldly Ether, as Caroline said. Please like and subscribe, and give these guys a follow if you haven't already. Thank you.